As Castlefield Gallery continues to celebrate its 40th anniversary, we're really excited to have work by Jo McGonigal and Frank Borlin in the gallery. Some of the works are returning to the gallery after first being shown at Castlefield Gallery in 1988 in a solo exhibition of work by Frank Borlin. And those works have been shown alongside earlier and much more recent work by Frank Borlin, as well as new work by Jo McGonigal. Both the artists share a real fascination and a commitment to formalist and abstract painting, and particularly they are both taking inspiration from, but also taking the tactics and the approaches and the elements of other disciplines, particularly sculpture and architecture, in order to really think about what painting is, what it can be, and what it can do.
In 1988, Dad was asked whether he would show paintings at the Castlefield Gallery, and he said yes. He always says yes. And the then director of the gallery said, we'd like to show your work alongside a sculptor. Who would you like to nominate to show, sculptors alongside your paintings? And my dad said, I'll do it myself. And that was basically how it started. He decided that he wanted to make some welded steel sculptures to sit alongside the paintings. And in the 80s, from the mid to the late 80s, he was very focused on making paintings that were very sculptural. A lot of heavily built up surfaces, lots of sort of vertical and horizontal struts. And he wanted to work out in the welded steel sculptures geometrical and formal ideas in metal that reflected and echoed what he was trying to do in paint. So I love this painting. When you see it in the flesh, what you get is this riot of color. Behind the green, under the green, to the side of the green, you've got all the colors of the spectrum, particularly this very intense cadmium red, which sits along the struts. So basically, it's a very large painting with a grid pattern. It's kind of overwhelming because of its scale, its size, its ambition. I think that the title came from a visit from one of his good friends, Dennis Dekaris, who's a Guyanese painter. He visited with his daughter, Sasha. And I don't know whether her bag is in the painting. Dad is notorious for taking people's personal effects and putting them in his work. Dad's titles are quite lyrical. They're often biographical or sort of almost like little diary entries. And I think that it is a really wonderful example of a sculptural painting because it is a painting. It's all about paint. And yet its physical structure is very sculptural. I love the fact that it echoes the Jo McGonigal sculpture, which is placed alongside it, which also has strong vertical, strong horizontal features. They really echo one another. Mummy Belly. I think it's got something to do with warfare, belly, post-bellum, post-war, and something to do with his mother. And I think there's something psychoanalytic in it. And I think it is something to do with a kind of internal conflict that's going on between him and his imagined mother, the good object, maternal object in his head. His mother was the most important figure in his life. He feels that he was her favorite son of 3 plus a daughter. She thought of him as very special. She set him out into the world with a great sort of store of personal ambition. And I think but there's still a kind of an internal struggle there. He's delighted to be showing alongside Jo McGonigal. He's delighted with the themes that she's working with, the relationship between sculpture and painting. I think he is fascinated by her use of old materials in new ways, like the use of gesso. So yeah, he's absolutely delighted to be back at Castlefield, decades on, and to be showing alongside a gifted younger artist.
A lot of my work looks at the kind of intersections between painting and architecture. So with this particular work, I began with using gesso ground painted directly on the wall. I find gesso a particularly interesting material to work with, it being the traditional ground for painting. So it's formed through the use of marble dust and animal glue, hide glue. So this is like a sort of traditional material of how you might prepare a ground for painting. And I've been interested in that as a material thing in itself, how it is a sort of surplus material, sort of geologically surplus, and combines the kind of animal mineral together. So even though the surfaces come across as quite kind of white monochrome surfaces, within them they still have this direct relationship to landscape. When it came to the curating of the show, we really thought about that upstairs space being where the show began, in a way, how it began with Frank's sort of white monochrome, off-white monochrome painting. But actually, when you get closer to it, you see that it's a really active surface, and there are these kind of hints of colour, this sort of band of like a kind of green going across the top of it that sort of slowly unfold. I really like these sort of relationships between seeing something all at once, and then but being pulled in to look closer. So these sort of principles of like a panoramic view of landscape, but then what happens through nearness and what happens through different proximities. For me, the architecture isn't just the walls that are being dressed by the work. I'm trying to sort of twist the architecture into the compositions and things that I'm making, so they become complicit as well in a way. So that was the starting point for the larger piece, was this, you know, big double height area. How can I make a sort of architectural, painterly intervention into that space, but in a way that's not kind of monumental or not too bombastic, in a way that is quite bold, but at the same time unfolding. So you almost might miss it. So it's making the viewer work a bit harder and engage different types of looking and seeing that isn't instant and fast. It's been an amazing experience in lots of ways, and you know, I felt honoured to share that space with him. You know, he's been an absolute kind of powerhouse in the area of painting and abstract painting, his explorations of kind of colour and formalism, and you know, so to have this positioning has been, you know, really exciting for me.